Well, Savannah, Georgia was the center of trade and commerce for the southeast Georgia area. And after slavery, most of the African Americans who were in this area moved into Savannah, and they were tradesmen. They organized their own businesses, and Carver State Bank was one of several financial institutions in the community. A life insurance company and a couple of other commercial banks were here. Louis B. Toomer, who was the founder of Carver State Bank, was one of those leaders in the African American community during the early 20s. And so in 1927, he and some of his contemporaries and personal friends formed what was called a private bank. It was the Georgia Savings and Realty Trust, and it was established on February 23rd, 1927. Now, that was the predecessor corporation of what we are here now in as Carver State Bank. Mr. Toomer was quite an entrepreneur, a community leader. He was a leader in the Republican Party during the Eisenhower administration, for example. He was appointed to the very prominent position of Registrar of the Treasury. And during those years when President Eisenhower was in office, Mr. Toomer actually operated Carver Bank in Savannah, as well as 4.5 days of every week he was in Washington, D.C., in his office in Washington, D.C. So he rode the train back. He would get on the train Thursday evenings or Friday mornings and ride back to Savannah and do some banking business. Mr. Toomer also owned a lot of real estate in Savannah. And so he was probably, during those early years, the African American who owned the most real estate in Savannah. He developed a total neighborhood. It's called Carver Village now. And so Mr. Toomer owned a lot of real estate. He also formed an insurance agency. And so he operated his own insurance agency. He had a property management business called Toomer Realty Company. And so he was certainly ahead of his time. He was an entrepreneur and a leader in this community. And so were several of his friends. I mean, some of them formed one of the oldest African American newspapers, the Savannah Tribune, was formed by one of Mr. Toomer's contemporaries, Saul C. Johnson. But Louis B. Toomer was also a friend of George Washington Carver over at Tuskegee. And when he formed his bank, he had so much respect for Dr. Carver until he called his bank Carver State Bank. And they were friends and contemporaries. And the bank succeeded, and it was a private bank from 1927 to April of 1947. In April of 1947, Mr. Toomer, a man who followed the trends of his time, decided that it was time to get a state charter. And so he applied for a state charter for the institution, and it was at that time he converted it into a state chartered savings bank. It was called the Carver Savings Bank. In fact, many of the elderly customers of Carver still call us Carver Savings Bank, because Carver Savings Bank was formed because Mr. Toomer knew that there was a need to finance homes for black people in the community. And in fact, that was the original purpose of him organizing his first corporation, the Georgia Savings and Realty Company. And Mr. Toomer financed a lot of the property in Savannah. If a black entrepreneur wanted to buy some real estate and build some homes, or if a family wanted to purchase a residence, almost all of them would have come through Carver, through Mr. Toomer's business at that time. And so in 1947, the bank functioned as a savings institution. People brought their savings there, and almost all of the professional people in Savannah would have banked at the Carver Savings Bank, and the teachers, and those were times of segregation. If you had walked into one of the white-owned banks in town, you would have had to stand in a separate line. You'd have had to drink water at a separate water fountain. If there was a restroom that they would permit you to use in the building, it would have to be separate from those that the white customers used, and so there was a very closeness between the Carver Savings Bank and all of the professional people in this community. So he functioned quite effectively for several years, and then a little later on, and of course during those years, Mr. Toomer's office would have been on what was called West Broad Street. So later on in the 60s, he moved the bank to Montgomery Street, and so when I came to town, of course, we were on Montgomery Street. But in 1963, when Mr. Toomer passed, Mr. Lawrence D. Perry took over the leadership of the bank. And Mr. Perry was a contemporary of Mr. Toomer. He had served as his cashier, and so he was the number 2 person in Mr. Toomer's organization. And after Mr. Toomer died, Mr. Perry thought that it made sense, and the board approved this, to convert the bank from a savings bank to a regular commercial bank offering checking accounts and other demand deposit services. So Mr. Toomer applied to the Commission of Banking in the state of Georgia for a commercial bank charter. So in 1963, Carver Savings Bank became the Carver State Bank. Mr. Perry served as president of that until I was elected president in 1971. And that was a very interesting time for me personally, because at that time I was 24 years old, and I had done my early education. I'd grown up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, left there and went to Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was a student at Morris Brown from 1964 through 1968. At Morris Brown, I majored in business administration, but I majored in accounting, but I had dual minors, one in business administration and one in economics, and I was a leader in a lot of campus organizations and a student leader on campus, and after graduating from Morris Brown in 1968, I entered the Harvard Business School in Boston, and so I was a student at Harvard Business School from 1968 through 1970. In 1970, my wife and I moved back to Atlanta, Georgia, and I took a permanent position at the Citizen and Southern National Bank. That was the leading financial institution in the state of Georgia, and it was one of the leading financial institutions in the entire Southeast. It was the right financial institution for me to affiliate with. And so I worked at CNS Bank and started working there as soon as I graduated from Harvard Business School, and it was a tremendous career. But that is how I learned about Carver State Bank. In fact, I learned about it during my summer work at CNS. I worked there summer of '69, and I traveled to Savannah. This is the head corporate office of Carver State Bank, of CNS Bank, was in Savannah, Georgia. So I traveled to Savannah and met the leaders of this bank in Savannah area, and decided that this would be a fantastic opportunity. And I met Mr. Perry, who was the president of Carver State Bank at that time, and really, when I met him, I was so excited about the existence of a small black-owned commercial bank in this small-sized city, until I asked him if he would offer me a job when I finished my second year at the business school, and so I stayed in touch with Mr. Perry. And after graduation, I took a job in Atlanta at the CNS Bank, and I stayed in touch with the people at this bank. So when he retired, I became a candidate for president of the Carver State Bank at that time, and was elected president in December of 1971. And at the time when I was elected president in November of 1971, but at the time when I was elected, I was actually 24 years old. So on December 1, 1971, I assumed the presidency, and of course I had a birthday in November, and so I was 25 years old when I officially took the office of president. And I have served as president since December 1 of 1971 until the present day. During those years, when I assumed the office, our headquarters was at 918 Montgomery Street. We moved that building. Our headquarters at that time had no drive-in facilities. It was a very popular business office, a banking office for most of the people in the Savannah community, and the bank did well. We were about a $4.5 million institution when I took over as president. I saw the need immediately for a new open facility with parking spaces and drive-in facilities and so forth. So we immediately began planning for a new main office for Carver State Bank, and we purchased some property just a few blocks away over on West Broad Street, one street over from Montgomery Street in downtown Savannah area. And we moved the head office of Carver from Montgomery Street to West Broad Street, and we built a beautiful building. We actually occupied that building early 1974, but that served as our main office building from 74 until July of 2010. But it was about an 8,000 square foot building. It was an ultra modern facility, all of the latest in banking techniques. It had a large customer office, plenty of enclosed officer offices in the interior, and the computer room and so forth. So it was a fantastic facility, 3 drive-in windows, and so it served us well from 1974 to the present day. That building, the bank grew immediately when we occupied the new building on West Broad Street from about $4.5 to $5 million up to about $11 to $12 million, and we continued to grow. So during that period of time, we saw a need because of the movement of some of our core customers to other areas of Savannah to start looking at the possibility of branching facilities. And of course, we built a branch on Habersham Street at one time, and that worked quite well for several years. Then we decided that it was very close to our main office as our customers became more mobile, and so we closed that office and decided that we would look further toward the southern part of the Savannah community for our next facility. That next facility was opened on December 11th of 2007, and right at the beginning of the early part of the recession. And we were the only bank in our community that was expanding its operation during that part of the recession. And that facility, when it opened, was absolutely a tremendous success. One of the things that I learned early in my life, and you can see it in the leaders of no matter what area they are, community leaders or national leaders and so forth. There's the motivation to be a leader, and it requires a special type of motivation. The aspiration is not to be a member of the club. You might be an effective member, you might know how to get along with people, but you eventually emerge as a leader of the group. And that kind of inspiration kind of came from my parents, and you can see it in all of our siblings. If you go through our family, almost every one of them have been a leader in something. And when I finished high school and finished my term of service as state student council president, I was during my junior year in high school, I actually took an exam. They offered an exam where you could test out of your senior year. You did not have to go to senior year if you make a certain score on this exam. I tested high enough to be able to skip my senior year in high school, and I was offered a full scholarship, well, a tuition scholarship to go to Tougaloo. And I was all excited. I told my mother that I had received this letter, and we were talking about going to college the next year, and she told me, what are you rushing to? And so my mother decided that I needed to go to my senior year of high school, that there was nothing urgent about leaving your senior year of high school, missing your senior prom, developing your personality and negotiating through your senior challenges in high school. She said that I needed to go to my senior. She said I was going to be in Hattiesburg that senior year going to high school. And so I really did not appreciate that as much until I got to college and enjoyed college life, because I'd enjoyed high school life, and my senior year was a great year for me in high school. And so I left there and was motivated to take a leadership role in whatever I did. During my first meeting at Morris Brown, when I participated in the marching band, they asked if somebody would help organize the band and would preside at the first meeting. And I was the only student in that marching band in Georgia from Mississippi, and I raised my hand and volunteered to help organize the band and preside over the organization meeting. But that was because all of my years of high school, I had been class president, a leader in the high school YMCA, the leader in the student government, and had presided over organizations. And so it was very easy for me to stand before a group of people and be the presiding officer. And I was immediately elected to a class presidency in the sophomore year at the college, and took leadership, president of the sophomore class and the junior class, and the next year. So I've always been in a leadership role in all kinds of organizations. And in addition, my parents insisted that we participate in the youth organizations of the AME Church. We were members of Zion Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church. So for about 6 years, I served as connectional president, or as district president of the Young People's Department of the Missionary Society of our church, and traveled nationally and ran for first vice president of the connectional YPD of the entire AME Church, and was very successful and served a 4-year term as connectional first vice president of the YPD of the AME Church. So in various areas of my life, I've always been in leadership roles. I don't think there's been a year since I was maybe 8th or 9th grade when I've not been president of something. So it wasn't totally unique for me to aspire to be president of Carver State Bank.
All right.